Hey, Matt.
Hey Rick, how's it going?
It's nice to be in your home.
Yeah, welcome to Santa Cruz.
Oh, man, I haven't been back here in years. It's so nice to be back. It's nice to be back when it's not foggy either.
Yeah, I mean, typically during the summer, we get the fog that rolls in the morning. Well, it's what keeps it cool at night.
Yeah.
Fog rolls in at night, stays cool overnight, and then by like noon, it kind of burns off, and you're like beautiful, sunny, warm. But it's great for especially not having air conditioning.
Yeah.
You actually can like open the window and stay cool at night, so it's pretty nice.
Does it get too hot during the summer, though?
I mean, a handful of days where it's a little unbearable, but not terrible. I mean, it's not like I just moved back here from Oakland
Yeah.
a year ago.
That,
And I mean,
did you grow up here?
I did.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I grew up in Santa Cruz.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's kind of a coming home, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
It's funny, I'm a big surfer, as you
Yeah.
know, and just running into people out in the water. It's so funny that, it's like I feel like you have to leave Santa Cruz to actually come back because it's easy to get jaded here with, there's a lot of small town crap that you got to deal with.
Yeah.
But coming back, it's just like quality of life is so great and it's just a slower pace. So we're really liking it.
I think it's probably been over. God, so I left California in 2017, so that was probably the last time I was in Santa Cruz. So not quite a decade, but it's been a while. And it's funny driving here. My wife's like, "You got to go in the ocean. You got to jump in." And I don't know if I'm gonna have time though. It's like it's killing me. So
I know. I mean, not that the water's warm, you would freeze your butt off, but if you want to touch the water, yes, it's worth that.
I'll do it. Trust me. I do the cold plunge every day. I could take it for a couple minutes.
This is kind of surreal, Rick. I mean, I feel like life comes full circle, right? I hired you at IDG, I don't know,
2010.
2010.
Yeah.
So 15 years ago. So crazy that we're sitting in my house
Doing a podcast,
doing
right?
a podcast. It's weird.
I know, and that's why I want to talk to you today, because I mean, you and I have been doing lead gen forever.
Yeah.
We've seen all sorts of stuff in your career. You've gone publisher side, agencies. Now you're working at this really cool platform. You've seen it from different angles too, and that's why I wanted to really just pick your brain on lead gen. What's working, what's not working. But first, why don't you give everybody just kind of like a background of who you are, where you are, and maybe some of those other experiences that kind of helped shape what you're doing today.
Yeah, so I mean, I've done a lot of different stuff within B2B. Had a couple of brief stints in consumer space, but primarily I've been in B2B publishing most of my career. So I worked at IDG, now Foundry, for a long time. I worked at IDG Tech Network, which was kind of like the first network of like B2B sites that we put together and did like programmatic advertising, and we did a ton of demand gen from there. But I also worked at Ziff Davis. I worked at Future. I worked at American Lawyer Media. But then I sort of got into the agency side at Group M and was working at Xaxis on their kind of audience activation platform, selling really programmatic advertising to non-Group M agencies. And that's where I kind of got into data and audiences and really sort of understanding like how those all, play into digital marketing, right? And then from there, I kind of did a brief stint back into the publishing. And then the last 5 years before coming over to LeadScale, I was at Kingpin, which was acquired by the marketing practice, B2B digital marketing agency. And then the last almost 2 years now, I've been with LeadScale. And LeadScale is really an interesting sort of proposition for me because at Kingpin, it was a UK-based agency. I really liked that kind of culture, and I liked a smaller organization. And so to kind of go back to what is in essence a startup company, UK-based, but 19 years in the business, been really sort of like, we've never taken any outside public-private equity funding. It's all self-funded. And the fact that we've been in business for 19 years and really sort of just in the last 2 years come over to the United States to really sort of tackle this market is kind of a testament to Robin Culler, the CEO, and sort of like how the business has been able to thrive outside of just, taking public equity money, which so many of our competitors have done.
So you were primarily buying, not you personally, but running a team, buying leads at your last job, the Kingpin agency, and now you're You're on the other side of that. So it's kind of cool that you've done both, right? You have a perspective from the buyer side as well as the sell side.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. So many of the suppliers that I worked with at the marketing practice, I'm working with at Kingpin again. I mean, it's such a small little community. Everyone kind of moves around, different, it's like, oh, I worked with you here and I worked with you here. And it's like, it is kind of a small family, even smaller than the broader digital marketing space, which is also a very small family where you run into people all the time.
Have you seen, well, I mean, of course you've seen, but like what kind of change have you seen over these years? I mean, coming in and out of lead gen and data. We'll put the data side, because obviously data's changed massively, but just lead gen specifically, what have you seen as the shifts and tides over time?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. It's like the more they change, the more they stay the same. And it's funny how things come full circle. Like especially last year, I remember, gosh, when I first started, it was all about doing BANT qualified leads. You want a budget authority, you need time frame. It was like, oh, this is the thing. That, I was like, okay, 10 years later, last year when the market was tough and people were tightening their purse strings and really trying to figure out like, how do we, do more with less, BANT came back in a full on, I'm like, oh my gosh, I thought I'd gotten away from doing
Here we are
BANT.
again,
Here we are again. So, again, a lot of it, the more it changes, the more it stays the same. I think, the fundamentals are still key, right? Is there a value exchange of what you're offering to people who are downloading the content that they're giving their valuable information over to? I will say from my side, and being more on the direct sales side and trying to like reach out to prospects and doing email, it is so hard to, and I sympathize with companies now. It is so hard to reach people, with the advent of like AI agents and, there's people get bombarded with calls, with emails, and I'm sure you're like me, like if I get a call from a number I don't recognize, I don't pick it up. I never do. Which, makes it challenging for people in the market who are trying to sell to prospects. And I think that just goes more back to the whole, you need to nurture these prospects. It's not like hey, I download a piece of content and now you want to talk to me. You need to nurture these prospects through a variety of channels and have a lot of different touch points, because it's really about the buyer is in charge of like, when I'm ready, I will have a conversation with you. You can't tell me when I'm ready.
It's funny because that is the challenge I see so much on the partnership side of things, because you go to just take a big Fortune 500 tech company. They run leads. They have the entire infrastructure in place to do this nurture process like you're talking about. You go to the same company on the partner side, and they're running leads with their partners, and that all kind of falls apart. Because a lot of times they're not even following up on the leads. They're handing it off to the partner. That partner might not have the resources, the infrastructure, or even just the skill set to understand that nurture process. And so I see it break down all the time on the partnership side, because what I hear is we're throwing leads over the fence and we don't even know if they're calling on it.
And why do you think that is? Is the partner sort of side the sort of forgotten stepchild of like the digital?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. I think for some things, some of these bigger partners, I'll use Microsoft as an example. I'm not saying this is what they do. I'm just using their name. They might be working with a startup, right? And that startup might have a marketing team of one, and that's their partner, right? And they're doing cool startup stuff in the AI space, but they haven't, as a startup, they haven't built the infrastructure to have a marketing automation system, to have a drip campaign, to have lead qualifications. And so Microsoft's co-funding this program. They're helping generate leads, and they're giving it to the partner, and it might just be going to a single BDR who might call each lead one time and have that unknown number and no one's picking up, and then the BDR saying the leads suck, and they're going back to Microsoft and saying there's no ROI from there, and so it's kind of a breakdown from that perspective. I think from other perspectives where the partnerships are a little bit larger and they do have some of this infrastructure in place, it's almost like three Spider-Men pointing at each other like, oh, I thought you were going to nurture. No way, I thought you were going to nurture, right? And so there can be a breakdown of who owns that nurture process. And so it's complicated, right? It's different for every partnership.
And I mean, I think like from, LeadScale perspective, we feel like the only data that matters is both transparent and true. Like if you start with bad data in, like that just compounds the issue throughout the organization. Yes, you need all of your CRM and all your different channels connected. And we see that all the time where everything is siloed, where marketing and sales aren't necessarily aligned. There's leads coming in. They're maybe not the right leads or what type of leads. But if you don't start with a point of, actual quality, so, validated data so that it's actually accurate, it's the right person you're talking to, it's verified, the actual structure, so often we see the structure of the data that comes through to clients is not right. And so that data gets rejected. And so just for no simple reason is a field's off or it's not correct. So some of those really basic things that I think people take for granted are critical for data coming in accurately. And then you can take the next step with that data. But if you don't have that, you're kind of missing the mark already.
Is that something that a marketer needs to do before they come to a LeadScale, or is that something like a LeadScale can help them with?
Yeah, that's exactly what, we kind of think of ourselves as the pipes and filters. We're not a data controller, we're a data processor. So, we're basically taking that data and helping to map correctly to make sure the orchestration is all in place, but also to ensure that the data sort of structure is accurate, but also the data itself. So is it contactable? Can you, is it the right person at the right company? Have they left the jobs? Is the title correct? Does it actually match the spec that the person or the company has given us before we actually bring that data in? Because if that's not accurate, again, then you get sales as kind of angry. They're like, hey, this isn't the right lead. It's the wrong title, whatever it is.
Yeah.
If you don't have that intervention before it gets to the client, it can be, pretty challenging.
You said something before we started this, in that we were talking about a LinkedIn article that you wrote, or a post you wrote, about how someone commented that, I think I have it here, content syndication is the worst channel in B2B marketing.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about that and your thoughts around content syndication today.
Yeah, it's funny. I also likened, that to sort of Brussels sprouts, which is, I hated Brussels sprouts for forever.
I think we all did.
Yeah,
back in the day, right?
boiled, kind of bland, had a funky taste, funky smell. And then I had Brussels sprouts, fried Brussels sprouts with bacon. It was like a revelation. And so I kind of, think of it as like, don't blame the Brussels sprouts, blame how they're being made, right? And I think that's really, when people say like that doesn't work, I don't, I think that's a knee-jerk reaction. I think, all channels in digital media have their pluses and minuses, they have their advantages, and they need to be used together. They need to be, you need to use right partners. You need to optimize. You need to test and learn. You can't just say like a carte blanche statement that it doesn't work.
Yeah. Let's talk about partners a little bit, because there's a million partners out there offering lead gen, right? And here I am starting a new company, and that's part of it, right? So they're not all bad. No, but seriously though, I mean, if you're a marketer, like how do you sift through all the partners out there? Everyone has 100 million member database, right? I mean, it's crazy. There's like 20 billion people in the company, our world now.
Yeah.
So like, as a marketer, like how do you sift through this to figure out like what are the key partners I should be looking for? What are those attributes from your perspective, especially coming back from the buyer side that you sat on?
It is very tough because everyone's got a good story, right? It's, we've got this AI intent, something. We've got this unique database of first party data. We've got, everyone's got their story or their little spin to it. And so it's very challenging, I think, to wade through all of that and sort of select the partners who are, legitimately, and this is like a key thing for us, are data originators. So people who actually own their own data, they have databases that aren't, they're not what we call blind blended brokers who are going out and scraping data off the internet or buying leads from a third party and then reselling them to someone else.
Yeah.
You feel like that's a recipe for bad data. That's a recipe for registrant denial, where people just say, hey, I never download this. I don't know who you are. And those are all common issues that I think advertisers face when selecting partners. And so one of the things that we do is we do due diligence on every single partner that we work with to ensure, that they're CCPA and CASL and GDPR compliant, that they are data originators, how they collect the data, how they handle that data when they get it, and how then they pass it along to us and then their clients or our clients, is of the highest, standard. We're ISO 27001 certified. So, for us, really data security and privacy is of the utmost importance. My CEO says this all the time. He's like, I live and work in GDPR world. He's in London. He's like, I actually, if I do something, out of line with that, I lose my house personally. He loses his house. So
Yeah.
for him, he takes it extremely seriously.
Well, I think for full transparency, we are forming a partnership, Partner Vista and LeadScale. And, I think one of the things that attracted us to this partnership was, frankly, the transparency of it, right?
Yeah.
So, you guys check all those boxes, but I think you come from an ethos of transparency, right? And I think from the partnership side, that's huge. Knowing this is a place we can go to get good leads, and then you guys bring that expertise, and then we bring the partnership expertise of like what we do next and how we help these partnerships that don't have the nurture and qualification capabilities. We can bring that to bear. But I think the transparency is a fundamental problem right now in the lead gen space, because there's a lot of people that spin up these lead gen companies out of nowhere, have quote unquote massive databases, and it's some questionable stuff going behind the scenes, right?
Well, and coming back to the demand gen space, for me, lead gen was always that sort of seedy underbelly of the digital marketing world, right? Like there's not, a double verify for lead gen necessarily, right? Like where we do have those kind of like organizations in the programmatic space, for instance, even though, obviously it has some of its own challenges, but I think that's where having someone like a LeadScale who can validate, verify these partners, do the due diligence on them, at least give some level of confidence to an advertiser that these suppliers are doing the right thing, that they've, how they handle the data is correct, that they won't themselves be exposed based on how they collect that data.
Yeah, my biggest advice always for marketers was, just put yourself in that user's point of view. Like if you're talking to a lead gen provider, and they're telling you about where they get their leads or how they get their leads, like just ask, say, hey, can you walk me through the user flow? Like, where do I find this content? Like, what does that look like? And it should be it should be an easy thing to answer. And it shouldn't be like a proprietary database or secret algorithm, right? It's so I love it. You mentioned something earlier about the value exchange.
Yeah.
Yeah. How should the marketer be thinking about the content and the process and what that value exchange is today, and is it broken?
Yeah, I think it is. And, obviously with AI and, it's funny, I was talking to a publisher the other day about this where, they've had issues because, basically anyone can go out and scrape their valuable content from their site, and then they don't have to actually pay for it, or they don't get any credit for it. And so I think it's really challenging to find, good quality content that then is packaged in a way that is useful for those people to use. I actually was at a conference, or for a developer conference, a couple weeks ago, and they talked a lot about that. Like, how do you make the content relevant for those user groups to the point where, they do feel like there is value exchange there. That when they do give over their confidential information, their contact information, that they do feel like they're getting something truly valuable in exchange for doing that. And again, I think that's where part of the process is broken, is that, we're talking about hundreds and tens of hundreds of thousands of leads trying to be processed. And, realistically, there may be a time where we need to go back to a place and say, hey, 100 leads of people who have engaged with content, who have done multiple actions on your website. That's not a $100 lead, or even a $50 lead, or a $30 lead. That's a $500 lead, because it is, they've shown intent, and you don't buy tens of thousands of leads. You buy, 200 leads, because those are more likely to convert to opportunities.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit about, two things, and they might come together. So we talked a little bit about data earlier, and I was like, let's table that for a second. So like thinking about data fluency, and also from the marketer's perspective, maybe your perspective for the marketer, what does that ideal lead gen program look like? And this is why I'm saying those two will probably come together, right?
It's a tough one, like ideal lead gen program. I don't know if there's an ideal, right?
Well, let me ask you this. Where does it go wrong? Like when someone comes to you and they just want leads, like what are they not doing that they should be thinking about?
Yeah, I haven't thought about who their target account is, who's actually buying, what is their ICP? Or they've spent, they've just had sales kind of kick over a list of like, here's 500 accounts that we think we should be going after. There's no rhyme or reason. Like, are those actually the right people should they be talking to? So I think like before they even start the campaign, making sure that they're targeting their target account list, all of the audiences that they're trying to go after are set up appropriately. And then you have the best chance of success with that. I think secondarily is also, how do you, what happens after you get those leads in? Do you have a process for nurture, or if they're lower funnel leads like BANT or something like that, do they actually go to sales and the sales following up in a timely fashion? One of the things we do see is a lot, is leads will come into a client and they'll sit for a week or 2 weeks, and people, they don't do anything with them. So there's a lot of decay around that data before they actually even get to that. So then that again leads back to registrant denial and people like saying, I don't remember downloading this lead, whatever it happens to be.
And then from a data fluency standpoint, how are you guys approaching that, and what do you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the ideal is doing a direct API into your, Marketo, Eloqua, HubSpot, Pardot, whatever it happens to be, ensuring that data is in close to near real time, is getting into that CRM or your marketing automation, and then it's getting routed to the appropriate places, right? And so that's also, some of the stuff that we do around the mapping of that data to ensure that, certain leads can be orchestrated to different places. So again, you may say like, hey, we only want 5 leads from this company. But if a C-suite comes in, that gets overridden because that is a priority, and you obviously still want that lead to come in. So there's different rules that we can do around that for data hygiene to get that to the right place.
Yeah, I think that's so key, right? I mean, it's like put together a lead guarantee, you have a target account list, and we get 1,000 leads, and we just kind of treat them all the same, right? But it's like, well, depending on their position in the buying team, maybe their level of activity. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why. Not only just not only just rate them better, but how we prioritize them and make sure that this is one that needs to go to head of the pack, right? Either based on activity or seniority or all the other signals that we're seeing.
Well, and that was the other thing, like when we kind of came up with this concept of XBM, which is anything-based marketing, because we saw a lot of companies that were sitting on data, and it's not always about net new data, right? It's like, what about all the data that you already have in the organization, those lapsed customers that, those customers who have only purchased one product, but that you could cross-sell or upsell that. So there's a lot of data that's just sitting there too. And so it's like, how do you get more out of the current data that you have? And that was really born out of this sort of XBM framework that we've developed around, again, data fluency, being able to look at all of your different channels together and sort of understand what can we do with this data? Can we reactivate it into LinkedIn that we have in the organization? Can we understand within an organization that we need additional titles because we've mapped who's we have in that organization, and there may be 3 or 4 additional contexts that we need for the buying committee to really sort of build that out. And that's, again, I think a key piece too, is it's not always about just bringing in data, it's also getting more out of the data that you currently have.
Yeah, it's funny because I think that's going back to the partnerships. That's a huge challenge for some of these partnerships, right? Because Microsoft's data is over here, and partner X data is over here. It's it's almost like you need to put together these really quick ad hoc data lakes to bring it together to execute this one program. But I mean, that's a lot of infrastructure and connecting pipes for one-off programs, right? And so, I don't know, maybe that's something that Partner Vista needs to solve. I don't know. Think about that long term.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a challenge. It's, there's data, and especially within the partner ecosystem, I think people have their own data, and, partners don't actually necessarily get feedback, especially, if you think of someone like Microsoft, you've got all these partners, they don't get direct feedback on the leads that come in. Are they being rejected? What happened? Do they move through the, So it sort of goes into a black hole, and there's not that sort of feedback loop. And I think that is really important, especially in the partner ecosystem, to get that feedback loop to understand, are we delivering the right type of leads, the right type of customers over to the partners that we're supporting.
Yeah, and I know that's always been a challenge for lead gen providers themselves too, right? Like you're running a program, kind of same thing. What's working? Where are we seeing success? Because there's a lot of things we can optimize and change, but if there's no feedback loop, we're going to just keep sending you the same stuff for better or worse.
I mean, you just made me think of something like when I was at Kingpin. So one of our longest standing customers was Quest, and one of the things that we built towards this, but we got direct quarterly reports from their sales force on lead progression down to the tactic and asset codes. So we knew every quarter, which suppliers are actually driving pipeline, what size of the pipeline, how many opportunities were created from different suppliers. That allowed us then to optimize each and every quarter. It just made us have better programs, more efficient programs. I mean, and it's one of the hardest things to get as, you know, I mean, that was one client, and we worked with dozens at Kingpin, and same with at LeadScale. It's really hard to get that data, but if you get it, you can make your program so much better and more efficient.
Did you have to work with them to kind of build that out, or did they just set up their CRM system in such a way they just provide those reports to
They
you,
would
or?
just provide those. We didn't actually have direct like API. They pulled them directly for us. We sort of set like what parameters we wanted.
Yeah.
And again, that comes with trust, right? We had worked with them for quite a few years, going on like 10 years at that point. So they trusted us with that information. But again, I think that's one of the things that if I could, you know, have a, you know, magic ball or whatever to say like, please do this, that really can help both the suppliers and the advertiser convert more leads, get better, and sort of find like those, you know, we call it gold dust, but find the gold dust within the leads that does actually convert.
Yeah, I think it's helpful too from a partnership standpoint for, you know, again, if Microsoft's sending all these leads over, right, and if all they're doing is just registering if there's an opportunity or a deal, there's a lot between sending the leads over and a deal being registered that they should at least be reporting back, and kind of taking that model, like push them to be like, all right, well, look, how many are responding to emails, calls, what, you know, are we getting any meetings set up? Like start to look at some of those early indicators before we get to deal, so we can start to optimize like, okay, we're on the right track with the leads we're sending, or no, we're off the wrong track. Maybe we need to go back to look at the target account list or who we're targeting within that account list. Like, there's a lot of signals there that I think are just not being reported on.
No, I mean, and all you kind of hear about as a, you know, I think on the supplier side and our side is like, it worked, it didn't work.
Yeah.
Why? I have no idea. I mean, it's sort of like magic, right? Like, I don't know. Maybe it worked, maybe it did not. You know, and it's that old saying, like 50% of my advertising works. I just don't know which 50%.
Right.
You know, it's kind of that.
Yeah. So where's all this going, or where's LeadScale going? Like, what does the future look like?
Yeah, really exciting, I think, point in our sort of inflection point at LeadScale. We are moving all of the, you know, learnings we've taken over the last 19 years, all of the validation and verification and sort of tools and processes we've put in place. We are now moving into our Gen 5 of our software, which allows advertisers to actually sort of have a SaaS-based model where they can take all of those tools themselves and utilize those to build their own worlds, to manage their own campaigns, do supplier discovery, manage RFP process throughout their, you know, as they want to go out and RFP different suppliers. They can do all the billing, all of the reconciliation, all of their documents are managed in one place, because that's one of the biggest challenges we find with a lot of our advertisers is everything's in disparate locations. And it's hard to manage. It's all in different places. So having one central place and tool to actually manage all that for them is really beneficial. And again, then they can use that to sort of create their own world for themselves, with bring in their own suppliers and sort of manage it with all of the tools that we would do on the services side themselves.
So in that example, just if I understand right, so if I'm a marketer and I'm working with, I'm just going to make up people, but Foundry, Ziff Davis, Intensify, I could still work with those, but kind of funnel it all through the LeadScale platform, so everything's just managed consistently?
Correct. And then I think the biggest piece is around supplier discovery. So, you know, you've been working with your 3 or 5 suppliers and you don't know who else is out there. So we will have a directory of suppliers that you can then RFP out to based on your exact lead spec, like, you know, what do you have to offer? How do you do it? Again, all vetted through our process, but it'll be a directory of suppliers that then you could go to and actually tap into for new suppliers, you know, different types of programs. So whether it's, you know, you've been doing traditional just content syndication and now you want to do double touch, or you want to do some tele re-verification or some survey-based program, there'll be options to be able to do that all yourself through the platform.
I think that's key. I mean, especially going back to the partnership side, you know, a lot of these partner marketers are wearing many hats, right? They're doing lead gen, they're doing content, they're working on the go-to-market strategy, they're, you know, partner satisfaction. Just to simplify that and make it, I worked with this marketer for years at Intel, and she always said, we need to make it so we can hit the easy button for our partners.
Right.
Right. And it's like, and that's just key. I mean, I think that's where this has got to go. And I also think there's going to be huge consolidation on the lead gen side. I think there's too many vendors with very little differentiation. And I'm not talking about like the big players, but like these startup, lead gen chop shops, I call them. And I think a lot of them will go away. And then, for you to help simplify the key players that are always going to be around, and then just manage that process for marketers.
I would just say that big always doesn't always mean better,
right?
When it comes to,
I shouldn't say big, but like trusted sources, I should say.
Yeah, and I think that's key. Trusted sources who have been vetted for how they actually go out and get leads. Because even some of the biggest that I won't name here are buying and reselling leads from other suppliers, and a lot of those are people that we work with. We feel like if we can get you as close to the original lead as possible, you're in a better position, better opportunity to convert that lead, and at least more trusted to actually bring it in.
Is there a way for a marketer to know if some of these, let's go with the bigger example, that some of these bigger players might be buying and reselling and doing shady stuff? Is there any way for marketers to know?
No. I mean, I think it's very, very difficult to know what's happening behind the scenes. Yeah. Again, I think that's why you need a third-party referee who's not grading their own homework to actually look at the marketplace and do that. And some of our competitors are doing sort of they're both buyer and seller of the leads, which becomes kind of a conflict of interest, right? And so I think that's where we want to make sure that we're, again, getting back to that transparency, we're transparent with who we're using, why we're using them, and give people that sort of visibility that they don't normally get.
Oh, I think that's a great sales pitch. So I like it. I think anytime you come back to just transparency, simplicity, and my biggest theme that I'm getting from this conversation is just back to the basics. Yeah. Really. I mean, the way we set up our programs, the way, don't even just take your target account list for granted. Like, why these accounts? Who within these accounts? Why are we targeting them? Like, just go back to the basics. Don't get super fancy. Just work with people that you trust. I think you got that. You're 90% of the way there.
Yeah, and I think again, it's funny. I follow this guy Steve Armenti on LinkedIn. I've had conversations with him, and he actually posted an article on LinkedIn this morning about target account lists, and sort of the fact that it's not a static list, right? It doesn't just sort of sit there and it's done, set it and forget it. It's a dynamic living thing that will, accounts will come in and come off of it, and you need to be constantly kind of keeping up on that, because again, if you just sort of set it and forget it, it may not always be the right account list that you're going after. Yeah.
I know we're almost out of time, but I want to get your thoughts on AI in terms of where does AI come into the lead gen story from your perspective?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, we're, exploring some ways to use AI to further validate. So part of our validation process, so leads come in and we do all of our automated checks, right? Around, is it accurate data? Is the person at company? But beyond that, did you actually download that asset? Are you interested in talking to somebody? So, we're starting to explore some other ways that we can use AI agents to further validate data. And I think that's a really interesting use case for it. Beyond that, again, I think it's challenging around the human element of writing content, right? I think anyone can, I use AI all the time for brainstorming and checking my work and making it sound more professional. But, I think it's got to still start with that idea that comes from us versus, AI generated. So I still think there's a lot of room for, good creative writers, content writers who are smart and can, put their own spin on it. AI has its place there, but that's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think there's always going to be that human element. And, I don't know how it's going to progress or change, but I mean, even today I can tell if someone did something entirely on AI or not.
Yeah.
Right. And it's why don't you start with your idea and have AI help polish it, right? As opposed to just have it spit something out. Because it's a lot of stuff I've seen is just not that good yet. And that could change, obviously.
Well, and just one last thing I'll say is, I was at that developer conference, and one of the things they talked about was the fear that AI is going to, any sort of junior developers that'll, totally replace all the junior developers. But then the question is, okay, then where do the mid-level and senior developers come from in the future? If all of those like junior developers are gone, but that's true of like, I think every single, I think industry and position, like you need to build upon knowledge, right? And you don't just like go from like, the ground to the sky, and, you got to actually build to get there. And so I think that's a critical element that people are missing. Like if we don't have those like people to build their skills, where do they get them from?
Now we're leaving on a really scary note because I don't know the answer.
I don't either.
We'll figure it out. If people want to learn more about LeadScale, where should they go?
Yeah, you can, leadscale.com is a great place to go check out more information. I'm Matt Levine. I don't even think I introduced myself.
That's okay. I'll have a little write-up about it.
Yeah, maybe I did. I don't know. Anyways, Matt Levine, and you can hit me up at matt.levine@leadscale.com if you want to reach out.
Very cool. Well, we at PartnerVis are very excited to partner with you guys.
We are as well.
I think you're doing some cool stuff. And yeah, thanks for having me in your home.
Can't wait. Thanks, Ray.
See you, Matt.